Hey guys, and welcome back. Now, in the previous nugget, we discussed some of the tools that we have available to us to work with EXT-based file systems. Now, we do have a few more tools that we want to discuss with respect to EXT, and those happen to be one called dump E2FS and another one called debug FS. So let's begin exploring what these two commands can bring us. So we will start with the very first one, dump E2FS. Now, quite honestly, this command can give you a massive volume of information. Quite honestly, it can be a little bit too much, at least in my opinion, so just be wary of the output of this particular command. Now, much of what you're going to see in this output is going to be related to what are called block group descriptors. Now, you can see this information, and in some cases this is definitely a useful piece of information to see, of course, but quite honestly, generally speaking, you're not going to be utilizing this information. Now, if you want to be able to omit this information and quite honestly shorten out the inputs by a great deal, make it much more readable, you can use the dump E2FS command with the -H option. In fact, if we go into the man page, dump E2FS, you can see what it's going to do is only display the super block information and not these block descriptors. So that is what we will do. Press Q to quit. Let's just clear the screen. And we can perhaps run it against SDB1 because, like we know, this is an EXT-based file system. So I will say sudo dump E2FS, and using that -H flag, I will target dev SDB1. So if I hit enter, I have to type in my passwords. There we go. Now we're going to get this information here. So this is like the information we see from the listing of tune2FS, whereas if we do not use the H flag, you'll get to see what I mean. Hit enter, we see way more information this way, okay? So realistically, you're probably not going to need all of this information on a regular basis at least, so we will stick to the -H flag. Now, some pieces of information that we want to be aware of is, say for example, this one right here, the file system features. Now, the reason why this is useful is this is going to allow you to see what your file system can actually do. For example, we can see here that we have the has journal option. This means that this file system is capable of journaling. Now, you may remember that ext2 does not have journaling. This was brought in on ext3 and carried forward on ext4. So the fact that we have an ext4 based file system, no surprise to learn that this file system does indeed have the ability to journal. But despite this, even if we did not know that information, we could easily find this information out using this particular command. Now, that is only one piece of information we would want to be aware of. Now, another very useful piece of information relates to our inodes, and it's this one right here, the inode count. Simply put, on Linux, every file must have an inode number. And this value here tells us how many inodes are available on the system, and if every file must have an inode number, in essence, this value tells us the maximum amount of files that you can have on your system. Now, we actually have our block count. This tells us the amount of blocks we have available on the system, and the reserve block count, this is how many blocks are reserved for the super user. Now, we did mention it is unlikely that you would want to see the entire output of this command, i.e. the output containing those block group descriptors. But actually, when you happen to be using the fisk utility when you want to repair a particular file system, you may get a very peculiar error denoting that you have something called a bad super block. Now, this is not something you're going to be dealing with any kind of regularity. But when you want to be able to invoke backups of your information, you can actually take the block group descriptor information. Say for example here, if I run the command again without the H flag, let's have a look at group 1 right here. Notice we can actually see the backup superblock location, and the value here is 32768. Now, if your superblock happens to be corrupted and you have some type of error, you could actually use this information with fisk. So you would take a note of the value here, and we would take a note of what we are targeting. In this case here, it's SDB1. And all I could do here is I could use the command fisc-b and then specify that block value and then specify what we are targeting against. And this super block is a vital component for your file system health. You will be able to use the backup information from the dump e2fs output in conjunction with the fisc utility, so that you still can check and repair this particular system. Now, one other command, like I say, I want to talk to you about very briefly is the debugfs command. Now, the debugfs command, this is a command line utility that allows you to do some interactive debugging. And this is going to operate with respect to ext2, ext3 and ext4 based file systems. Now, before we can use this interactive debugger, our file system that we want to target must not be mounted. So what I will do is I will actually unmount SDB1. Okay, so if we check, we can see SDB1 no longer is mounted. Let's clear the screen. And I can say debug fs. Now what I want to do is I want to be able to open a particular file system. So I can say open and I'll say dev SDB1 and hit enter. And of course, as per usual, I want to be using sudo privileges. So I'll start this again, apologies. Okay, so with super user privileges, this time I will open. Now we have opened this. If I want to view file system statistics, I can use the command stats within debugfs, and we're going to get a bunch of statistics. If I want to browse the file system, I could do ls. Now within this unmounted file system, there is not much to see here. All we have is our lost and found directory. But nevertheless, on many more file systems, you may see a lot more information. And we can press Q to quit the program. So really what we can see here with debugfs, we can get information about our unmounted file system using things like ls. We can get statistical information, and quite honestly, many of the options available within debugfs are really similar to regular Linux commands. Now, a common use case with debugfs is if you happen to maybe say delete a particular file accidentally, what you could do is you could unmount the file system, and then you could use the command lsdel to list your deleted files, and ultimately use the undel command with this information you receive from this output, and you can potentially, although not always, recover that accidentally deleted file. This would be a perfect use case of using such a tool. So these tools, debugfs as well as the dump e2fs command, both of these tools give you additional features and functionality to be able to manage and recover information based on ext based file systems. So that is us for ext based file systems. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.